Thank you very much. And boys and girls, youngsters, you can go to your classes. Except for the senior high schoolers, you need to stay here today. I ask you to turn your Bibles to the book of Leviticus, chapter 20. We won't read from there right away. Actually, if you could turn this microphone down a little bit. I tend to get rather vocal, and that way I don't feel like I have to be screaming in your ears. If you were with us last week, you would realize that the subject which we talked about was sex. I don't know if that's why we had a large crowd here or not, but if they say sex sells, maybe we should try that for sermons too. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. But basically we asked two questions. And those two questions had to do with the subject that we were about. And you guys don't like the front seat or what? These were the best seats in the house. Okay, good. I noticed that the pulpit was pulled back a little bit, so I have to use a little more force to spit that far, but get your hankies out just in case. So we asked the question, why is the subject of sex in the Bible? Typically, we just don't associate sex with Bible. Usually sex is associated with other things, everything else except the Bible. But the thing is, the answer to that is simply because we're sexual beings. We have a gender, and being humans, we have this sexuality, and so that's going to be addressed in the Bible. And also the bottom line is this. Sex is the basis of propagating life, so obviously it's going to be in the Bible, but the most important reason why sex is in the Bible is because God created it. God created it, and because God created us sexual, He alone has the authority or the ability to define the bounds for us. This is very important for us to understand. God is vitally concerned about how His gift to us of our sexuality can be best enjoyed. God cares about that. He cares about, we've seen in our study of Leviticus that He cares very much about what we eat even. He's concerned about every minute aspect, and our sexuality is not a small thing, it's a very important thing, so that's why the subject has to be in the Bible. And we also asked the question, then, what does this human sexuality have to do with the holiness code? What does sex have to do with holiness? Typically, those are two words we don't put together very often either. Holy and sex. Fact is, the title of this sermon is Holy Sex Part 2. So, we want to look at that on this occasion too, because it's really important for us. I think that we understand how our human sexuality fits into the whole holiness, holy life that God has for us. The theme of Leviticus that we've been studying through the last several weeks has to do with the practice of living holy in the presence of God. How do we go about actually living holy in the presence of God? And the reason we need to ask that question is because it's very simple. God is holy. Therefore, he demands and expects that we should be holy also. So, how then are we going to do this? How then are we going to live a holy life? We're going to live a holy life by following his design. Here's the thing. Oftentimes we have this idea about God as being this this judge who makes these arbitrary rules. Is this guy who just says, I want to make some rules for you to follow, and he puts them all in, and sometimes they don't make sense to us. There's a couple of things we need to understand. First of all, if we believe that God made this world, God designed it perfectly. God did not bring sin into the world. We brought sin into the world. And in God's perfect design, he has a perfect desire for how things should work to the very best. And if we want to know the very best and we want to experience the very best, then we should follow the design of the designer. Isn't that right? How many of you know how to use very simple tools? How many of you know how to use a screwdriver? Do you know what a screwdriver is for? Wow, we have some very incapable people here. How many of you have taken the other side of the screwdriver and used it as a hammer? Yeah, but a screwdriver is not made to be a hammer, and so you'll be frustrated trying to hammer in a spike using the backside of a screwdriver. But the fact is, when a screwdriver is used as it should be and properly, wow, it's a wonder how it just, especially if it's an electric one, you go bzzz, it just works very well. The point is there is a design and a purpose behind it, and when we understand God's purpose and design, that's when we experience the most fulfillment, because we see how God has designed it, we receive the maximum joy and the sense of purpose in it, and so that's why we have this subject in the Bible, because God realizes that we are holistic beings, and he doesn't divide between the spiritual and the secular. God doesn't divide between the different parts of our life. And so I want to say to you, we can't say, well, this is the part that I live out in public, and then I have a different life that I live in private. We can't say that this is my personal relationship with somebody, and then on the other side, this is my physical, sexual relationship with somebody. God just doesn't see it that way at all. It's a wholeness and a holisticness that we need to understand. So, therefore, our sexuality, and I would say the act of sex, has a holy purity. God intended it for it to be wonderful, magnificent. It has a spiritual significance to it. The problem is this: we ruined it. We ruined it. Because instead of seeing that part of our life as being something we give, something that we can enjoy, we take it and we want it all for ourselves. So, as we looked last week in Leviticus 18 reveals to us then the proper view of sexual relations. God's view of proper sexual relations. And what did he do? He tells us in these verses there that sex is only proper within a committed covenant relationship. When you look through those relationships that he talks about in Leviticus chapter 18, you'll see that every one of them come from a husband-wife, mother-father relationship, and how that works and all the rest of the relationships that are surrounding marriage. We also see in Leviticus 18 that sex is forbidden in certain relationships. Therefore, marriage to certain family relations is also forbidden between close family relations. Marriage and sex is forbidden between same-gender partners. That's made very clear in Leviticus 18. I'll mention a little bit as to why. And then we also see, and the reason that this was important is because this was a practice of the people in that area, and that is sex between humans and animals. We might think, who would do that? But that was a practice in the land of Canaan. It was a disgusting practice that God said, because of these practices, I'm going to spew you out of the land. Now, we come to Leviticus chapter 20. All right? And Leviticus chapter 20 reveals to us then God's view of proper, not just proper sexual relations. It reveals to us God's judgment when his design and intent for holy sexual relations is ignored and disobeyed. In other words, there's consequences for not following God's design. It's the same thing as using the wrong side of a screwdriver being a hammer. There's consequences for that too. You ruin the handle of your screwdriver, and if you bang hard enough, you'll splinter that thing, and it won't be of any use at all. So there's consequences. Now let's read together from Leviticus chapter 20. And, we're going to read the whole chapter. It's 20-some verses, almost 30 verses, and so it's a good read. But in order for us to really get where God's coming from, and may I say this again to you, I want you really to understand this. This is not my idea of morality, all right? This isn't something that I came up with. It's not something that's written in the health books. It's not something that you might have as your health teacher might tell you. What we're looking at here in this book is God's book. It's God's word. It would behoove us, it would be wise of us to say, what is God teaching me? Because if we are God's creation, I can guarantee, and God says it, you will give an answer. I will give an answer one day before God for how we have kept his design. So, keeping that in mind, let's read. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to the people of Israel, any one of the people of Israel, or of the strangers who sojourn in Israel, who gives any of his children to Moloch, shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I myself will set my face against that man, and I will cut him off from among his people, because he has given one of his children to Moloch to make my sanctuary unclean and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do at all close their eyes to that man when he gives one of his children to Moloch, and do not put him to death, then I will set my face against that man and against his clan, and will cut them off from among their people, him and all who follow him in whoring after Moloch. Verse 6. If a person turns to mediums and necromancers, whoring after them, I will set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. Keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you. For anyone who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother, his blood is upon him. Verse 10, if a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. If a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed perversion. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with a male, as with the woman, both of them shall have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man takes a woman and her mother also, it's a depravity. He and they shall be burned with fire, that there may be no depravity among them. If a man lies with an animal, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. If a woman approaches any animal and lies with it, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man takes his sister, a daughter of his father or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace. And they shall be cut off in the sight of the children of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, and he shall bear his iniquity. If a man lies with a woman during her menstrual period and uncovers her nakedness, he has made naked her fountain, and has uncovered the fountains of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from among their people. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, or of your father's sister, for that is to make naked one's relative. They shall bear their iniquity. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. Verse 22. You shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my rules and do them, that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out. And you shall not walk in the customs of the nation that I am driving out before you. For they did all these things, and therefore I detested them. But I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has separated you from the peoples. You shall therefore separate the clean from the beast and from the unclean, and the unclean bird from the clean. You shall not make yourselves detestable by beast or by bird or by anything which the ground, with which the ground crawls, which I have set apart for you to hold unclean. You shall be holy to me. For I, the Lord, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. A man or a woman who is a medium or a necromancer shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their blood shall be upon them. This is the Holy Scripture given to us by Holy God in telling us his holy desires for you and for me. And you'll notice that the young people are in here this morning. I asked that they should be in here this morning. I can promise you this. There's nothing in this Bible that they haven't heard about already or even seen graphically already. I can guarantee you that our children have been a lot further along that road than what we've seen in our Bible here. So I make no apologies for what the Bible says. In fact, I think that we as parents ought to be a lot more honest with our children and know what is going on in their world. Most of us don't have a clue. So I would say to you this. By reading through Leviticus chapter 20 and seeing what God has to say, this is not a petulant God. This is not a God who, on a whim, throws a fit because he doesn't get his way. This is what we're reading is of a creator God who has designed and created a wonderful world for us to live in. A God who with all of his being desires that we enjoy life, that we live life, and he knows that in order to do that, we need some encouragement to live life his way. And he says, if you will live life in my way, you will enjoy and have the expressions of God and his joy. But if you don't, then here are the things that are going to happen. I'm simply saying, if we want to enter into the mind of God, we should read it and say, what is God's perspective on these sexual relationships? Now, what's happening is Yahweh, the Jewish God and our God, is developing for his people. And remind you that his people came out of Egypt. They had been 400 years there. 400 years, about 10 generations. How many of you are second generation? Let me see. Are there any people here who are American-born Chinese? American-born Chinese. Oh, you can raise your hand high, folks. Yeah, okay, American-born Chinese. Right, so here's the thing. Here's what I've noticed. I pastored a church, a Chinese church in the U.S. It was a Chinese church in the U.S. Mainly they were ABCs. There were several young people in our church who were third generation American-born Chinese. Do you know what? You couldn't tell them apart from what you would call American. They were American in every sense of the word, only third generation. Can you imagine what 10 generations in a place like Egypt would be and how close the people of God might be like the Egyptians? And God says to his people, I'm going to bring you out of Egypt, but you're not to be like the Egyptians. God says to you and I'm going to bring you out of this world. I'm going to redeem you. You're not to be like the world which you've been redeemed from. That's what he's saying to us here. And so he begins to teach his people a worldview, one that is holistic, one that isn't divided and compartmentalized, in that God does not distinguish between the physical and the spiritual. In fact, he relishes in the physical body. God loves it when we're in good health. God is concerned that we eat good food. Why? Because we will worship God better, we will worship God more thoroughly if we are in good health. Now, we might worship God more fervently when we're sick because we're begging him to heal us. But when it comes to service and worship, God wants us healthy. the thing is, in order for us to understand this, we need to realize that what we've seen in Leviticus, all of the life of the Jews was focused around the worship of God. The tabernacle that was built in the center of the camp, that was the worship center. All things having to do with the relationship between the Jews and their God took place in that worship center. In fact, we saw that if they wanted to eat beef or lamb, meat, if they wanted to eat meat, it had to first be taken to the tabernacle, sanctified, sacrificed, and then after that, they could take their portion home and eat it. I'm saying that every part, God told them their relationships, He told them how to go about life, and the tabernacle was not only the center of worship, it was the center of their life. I would say to you, friends, that God's view has not changed. I'm not talking about this place we call church. I'm not saying that this place is the center. But I'm saying to you that the Spirit of God who dwells within us, He is the center, the focus of all our life. Everything must be surrounded and focused and caught together with the Spirit of God who dwells in us. Because He lives in this tabernacle. Paul tells us that in the book of Corinthians. Now, this worldview that God is developing for His people is a worldview that distinguishes His people from those who are not Jews. And so it's His perspective that demands for His people separation, difference, and distinctiveness. God says it over and over and over again in Leviticus. Now, here's what I want us to see here, that we should not get too bogged down in the detailed laws, because some of those things just don't have a bearing on us. For example, you're not going to take your lamb you're not going to bring it to me and ask me to bless it before you eat it. I promise you that. I mean, we don't need to do that today. But what we should see here is that God's perspective is no matter what generation, no matter what time, there must be a distinguishing feature, a difference about us that identifies us as God's people. Let me read you the last part of Leviticus chapter 20 again, through 22 to 26. He says, "You shall therefore keep all my statutes, all my rules, and do them, that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out." Remember, He's telling these people who have come out of Egypt, you must do these things. Therefore you're good. It's that the land will bless you, and you shall not walk in the customs of the nation that I'm driving out before you. For they did all these things. Therefore I detested them. And He says to them, I am the Lord your God who has separated you from the peoples. I am the Lord your God who has separated you from the peoples. Holiness and separation are one and the same. One and the same. We're separated to God, separated from the world. Holiness and separation are one and the same. Now, I say that because I know my background, where I come from. I come from a very legalistic background. The thing is this, is in the legalistic background, it wasn't the heart that makes the difference. It was merely the activity. Please stay with me, because we're going to make that very clear when we get to the end of today's message. The first thing I'd like, there's some things for us to notice here. If we ask the question, what can we learn from what God has to say? What can we learn from, say, chapter 18 and chapter 20, as far as what God is trying to get over to His people with regard to a biblical worldview? Now, please notice that I use the word biblical worldview. I tend not to use the word Christian worldview, because in our world today, the word Christian has a whole, in fact, you can have a Christian political party. Now, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about a Christian worldview. We're talking about a biblical worldview. Now, it's important for us to know, what does the Bible say as far as our worldview is concerned? And one of the things we want to notice, I touched a little bit on last week, is God's definition of family. God's definition of family. Why is that important? Because there's a lot of people who want to redefine what the family is. I suggest to you that, just like the screwdriver, we don't go back and redefine the usefulness of the screwdriver. The designer decides what the usefulness of the screwdriver is for. And when we look at that, we need to see that God's definition of family consists of a man and a woman.
Amen.
Thank you. Why do we have to pause and explain that? God says it's a man and a woman. And folks, I'm not going to get into this whole argument of whether or not same-sex marriages are legal or not. That's what governments take care of. But are they moral or not? Is it God's plan or not? Is it God's plan that there should be same-sex marriages, that a child should have two mommies or two daddies? And honestly, my desire is that we could see this world through God's eyes. Because I can promise you that it's the desire of God that that relationship should be a fulfilling relationship. And it's not just a man and a woman, but it's a man and a woman who are in a committed covenant relationship. This idea of a casual agreement or even a contractual agreement, as far as God's concerned, a family consists of a man and a woman committed to each other in a covenant relationship. Then they become joined together sexually to produce children. The idea of the whole sex act is always within this context of a man and a woman in a covenant relationship. And I want to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you not to argue with me if you don't agree with these things, because I know there's good people who don't agree with what I'm saying here. But I'm saying if you want to know the mind of God, study it for yourself. Study it for yourself. So, because God's definition of family is this man and woman committed to each other in a covenant relationship, they're joined sexually together to produce children. Sex, therefore, is a holy, sanctified act. It's holy. It's godly. It is by design to be both beautiful and enjoyable within the context that God's put it. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't some pleasure outside, but listen, there's pleasure in all kinds of sin. If it's pleasure that we're looking for, then there's all kinds of things that can satisfy the desires and the lusts of the body as far as pleasure is concerned. What we're talking about here is what pleases God. When we please God, and I'm telling you folks, if you were a child, you were happiest when mom and dad were happy, right? If you're a child of God, you will be happiest when your Father God is happy. Just do according to His design. So, we also see then in this kind of relationship, and God is talking about the family, that sex is a creative act. This in the family situation, we see where the husband and wife come together. They actually join together with God in the creation of life. Think about it. When husband and wife come together and a baby is to be born, that's a life that you, together with God, hand in hand, were able to create. And this is what God allows us to join in with Him in this whole beautiful act of creating life. So that we see that sex is a creative act. It's procreative. And may I say this, listen carefully. Biblical sex is always intended to be procreative. Sometimes in our world, we like to think of sex as being simply recreational. It's not recreative. It's not recreational. Sex is intended to be procreative. And when you look through the Bible, it was always ever intended that. And it was God who said that we're to reproduce. It's humans joining with God in this creative life. I have to say this because this is very biblical. Please don't take offense because it's in the Bible, all right? The spilling of semen was a sin punishable by God. Why? Because that was the life that God has given for the two to join in this creative act together. If it's wasted and spilled, God took offense at it. God took offense at it. The biblical mandate is to reproduce and fill the earth. That's never been rescinded. It's never been cut back, except in our modern culture. And this is why I say to you, we need to re-examine then how we do things and how we operate with regard to what our culture teaches. Our culture screams out, we need to be careful of population, overpopulation. I don't want to go down that road. I just want to tell you here, as we look through the scripture, that when we see that God's definition of family, we see that in that family, sex is a holy act. It is a creative act. It was never intended to be anything other than that within this family definition. Any other definition then opposes God's creation, his design. It was the way he designed things. It isn't about the law. It isn't about the rules. It isn't about being grace or law or which side of the covenant we're on. It is simply about what are the intentions of God in creation when he created these creative acts in which we can be together with God in the creation of life. So, we teach our children safe sex. Safe sex is only safe when it's in a holy union between a man and a woman in holy matrimony. Biblically, sex is never separated from procreation. That's a biblical worldview. So sex and sexuality are given by God in creation for the intimate union of a man and woman in marriage, both for the bonding of intimacy and the creation of new life. The second thing I'd like for us to see, that has to do with the first thing, has to do with God's idea, God's intention for family, that unit that he created in the garden there. The other thing I want us to see is with regard to biblical morality. There's some words that we need to pick up in the scripture here. One of those words is nakedness. We see a lot of that. Not nakedness, the word. I already knew where your minds were going, all right? So, and actually we do see a lot of nakedness too. But there's a lot of that word in this scripture here, and it simply means what it says. Nudity, shame, nakedness of a thing, indecency, improper, exposed. The first time it's used is in the book of Genesis, when Adam and Eve sinned. This is the first time that nakedness is spoken about. First time, God created Adam and Eve, and he created them male and female. And for whatever reason, God makes a point of saying they were naked. They were naked, but they weren't ashamed of it. They didn't know that they were naked. The thing is this, then, that in coming to this point, it was when they sinned that they realized their nakedness. And in having done so, the first act of God was to cover them up. To cover them up. And ever since Genesis, the creation, the garden, until this day, we have been trying to uncover what God covers up. It's the human sinful nature to uncover what God has covered. God has always intended for his people then to be covered from the beginning. Then we also see this word uncover. Uncover the nakedness. It just simply means to reveal something that God has covered. And then notice also the word it uses see, to look upon. And we have to understand that in relation to the fact that God is speaking to men. Did you notice that in the scripture there? He's speaking to men. About their fathers, about their wives, about their daughters. He's speaking to men. This is a male-dominant society. It's a male-dominant Bible. But it's interesting to notice that when God speaks to this about men, he knows what he's talking about because we men are visual beings. We men are easily swayed by things that we see. If you don't believe me, you talk to an advertiser. Advertisers, they get it. They know how to give a visual picture so that you say, I see that, I want it. It's exactly why I bought an iPhone. It looks sexy. It's amazing how, no, that's not why I bought it, because it looks sexy. Okay, let me just take that back, because somebody's going to say, oh, Pastor. Yeah, but I promise you that's the idea behind so much advertising, because of the fact that advertisers know that as far as men are concerned, sex sells. That's why that there is a huge multi-million-dollar business of pornography. It's based on this fact. Now, I had a good friend several years back who said to me, he was a missionary, married to a lovely wife and a couple daughters, a good guy. But he said to me, he says, Dave, pornography doesn't affect me. I'm not. It just doesn't bother me. I can see it. It doesn't bother me. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? You're weird. The reason he's weird is because God made men to be attracted through their eyes. How do you think we get these relationships begin anyway between a man and a woman? There's an attraction there. And I let me just tell you from personal experience, okay? I know what kind of person I am. At least I think I do. But it amazes me, and I kind of chuckle every time. But I can be walking down the road, minding my own business, just kind of keeping my eyes straight ahead, and even driving the car, for an example. I've been driving the car down the road, and it just amazes me how out of the corner of my eye, I can see a female form, and my eyes go zing, catches my attention. It's amazing to me how that happens. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm thinking lustful thoughts. I just think I go, my soul, that whatever that is, however that form, that figure, whatever it is, it just catches the attention for a moment. And then you can decide what you want to do about that moment. But the point is, for us men, we need to understand we have to guard our eyes. We have to guard our eyes because we are so caught up by things that we see. And in a moment we can see something and say, I want it. I want it. Now, I'm not a woman, all right? So I can't speak very well on their behalf. But what I've been told is that women are not so much caught up by what they see, but by the emotions of things that they feel or the emotions that they sense somebody has towards them. There's a huge difference between the man and the woman. It's a huge difference. So much of our problem is because we really don't understand. Guys, men, we sometimes look at those women and we go, where in the world did that come from? We just don't get it. And our wives look at us and they go, are you a numbskull? Don't you get it? And this whole marriage thing, it's been 30-some years and I'm still learning how that works. I learn more and more things about the female way of thinking and sensing and feeling. It's just, I could take a rose and I could give a rip about a rose. But did you know that a simple rose can go a long, long ways to making right something you did wrong? So, because of this thing with regard to modesty and how the Bible teaches us about modesty, and it talks about uncovering nakedness and seeing these things and the whole euphemism of sexual relations. Men have to be careful what they see. But let me just say something. There is another side of the coin. The reason I say this today to you, ladies, is because you need to understand that your man is affected by what he sees. This multi-million industry called pornography, it's a horrible thing. And most of you women don't understand the attraction. You don't get it. We get it. But by the same token, I want to say to you, it does matter how you dress, ladies. It does matter how you dress. Because if on my side I have to guard my purity, then on your side, you need to help your man and you need to help your brother with what he sees and what he thinks. You need to dress modestly. And may I say to you that when the Bible talks about nakedness, what is nakedness? I suggest that most of the clothing we call swimsuit or bathing suits would be naked by Bible standards. By Bible standards. I saw an old movie not too long ago, and this girl was really a good swimmer, but she had shorts down to here, and this blousey thing that came way out like this, and showed absolutely no form, and a hat that looked like a night hat, and it really was and it was bright pink, nice and feminine and so forth, and it had little laces around the bottom, and yes, I laughed too, but it was modest. Now, I understand the world we live in, folks. I understand the world we live in. But this all comes down to, do we want to see God's perspective? From where I come from, we were not allowed to go swimming with girls. Where I come from, they called it mixed bathing. And I said, I'm not taking a bath with a girl. I mean, I'm swimming, and there's a difference. But it was called mixed bathing. We weren't allowed to do that. And I, as a teenage guy, I didn't get it till I had daughters, and then I got it real well. Yeah. And so I told my daughters, yeah, you can go swimming with those guys. You got to wear a t-shirt. Dad, I get it. You may not. You trust me, but I get it. It's because I know what guys are thinking. And my daughter doesn't know. She thinks they're cute. My point is simply this, folks. If we're going to be a godly people and we're going to be a holy people, we better step back from the brink a little bit. We better take a good, honest look through the eyes of God. That's all I'm asking. I'm not setting up rules and regulations of how much skin has to be covered. I'm simply saying to you, you stand before God in what you call a bathing suit and see if you feel comfortable. You decide. And I also want to say to women about and wives about your husbands. You should ask your husband on occasion, dear, have you been visiting pornography sites? Come on, ladies. You're not doing it to be accusing. You're just doing it because you want the purity of your husband. You want them to be honest with you. And besides, I would suggest to you, ladies, that this may not be very kind, but maybe you could be more of that attraction to your husband by working on your physical presentation. And I don't mean this to be unkind. I'm just simply saying that's the way men work. It's not that they're going to love you any less, but you can say to him, let me help you. Because the accountability, since creation, the accountability has been on the man. God did not hold Eve accountable. He went right to Adam. He says, Adam, what did you do? He held Adam accountable. Men, you and I are accountable to be godly men. Let me go quickly to the next point that I think is being brought out in this passage of Scripture here, and that is the biblical role of men. The biblical role of men. Probably not the best place to do research on that, but I went to the internet. Men are just worthless wimps. And in fact, I looked at this one site that was rejoicing in the fact that there isn't this, that men are losing their masculinity. There seems to be a coming together of the feminine and the masculine, and there's not the separation that there used to be in culture. And it was being rejoiced. And I'm going, oh boy, are you kidding me? Pretty soon I'm going to wear a dress to church. Oh, wait, I don't need to because you don't wear dresses either. So we're in good shape. But here's the thing is that I can promise you, you will not find any support for the design of God in this world. You won't find it. You can't look at the standards and you can't look at the philosophies put out by this world and expect them to be anywhere close to God. I'll tell you what you can expect. You can expect them to be different and opposed to God's plan and God's design. You can expect that. So when God says to his people, I want you to be separate, he knows what he's talking about. He knows that in order for us to be distinctively his and to be a holy people, there's going to have to be a difference. It's going to be noticeable. And so the Bible, I said this last week, and the Bible places an emphasis on male dominance. Ooh, I can see you shiver already. Male dominance. And there's, immediately we put, and even some more liberated men will put up their shackles, as it were, like, oh no. Hey, but again, folks, I really don't care what you think about it. I really don't. I'm only saying to you this. Let's see what God says, all right? That's all I'm saying. And it's very clear in the whole book of Leviticus, there's clearly, in fact, it's from Genesis to Revelation, there's clearly a strong emphasis on the dominance of men or the male man. And you can say it's cultural, yes? It does have its cultural roots. There's no doubt about it. But where do those cultural roots come from? Wayne Grudem is a theologian. He wrote a book entitled Biblical Foundations for Manhood and Womanhood. All right, so you don't need to go any further. You already know what he's talking about, right? Biblical Foundation for Manhood and Womanhood. He gives 10 reasons why the Bible speaks of male headship in marriage in the garden in Genesis. In other words, a long time before we get here to Leviticus. And let me just, you can look it up, but let me just give you a couple of reasons why he says male headship. Man was created first. Paul says the same thing in his letter to Timothy. Man was created first. Therefore, we are accountable. God called the human race man. Genesis chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. I know we're very careful about, when we talk about the race thing, we talk about humankind or humanity. We don't use the words mankind anymore, or the people are using the term man to define humanity. We just don't do that anymore, and that's okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But I'm simply saying that if you look in Genesis chapter 5, God called the human race man. Now, he may change his vocabulary later on, but that's up to God to do. God held Adam accountable. And also, when God made Eve, he made it very clear, God made Eve a helper to Adam to complete it. Now, I say these things because it's very clear that God holds men accountable, and there's a certain role that we're to play. But since the fall, since Adam and Eve sinned, we have worked against God's plan. We have worked against God's plan, and it's caused a dysfunctional society, so that we men have in general failed our role. The reason for the dysfunction in society is largely because we have failed to fulfill our responsibilities. And the only way that we can renew our role as men is to be restored through redemption in Jesus Christ. What's the biblical role for men? Very quickly. Men, you can sit up real straight now. Man up and take it, all right? This is not David Homer speaking. You read the Bible and you see over and over again, God is talking to men. Doesn't mean he doesn't talk to women. Don't get ahead of me, all right? Biblical role for men, first of all, we've seen in the book of Leviticus, the biblical role for man is priest. Who is it that represents his family before God? It's the man. It's the father. From Genesis through Leviticus into the new covenant, men are intended to be the spiritual leaders. I have to say, I really do appreciate on Sundays seeing these men stand up front and lead the worship. I've never been opposed to women doing that, and it's just that I'll tell you what it does for their sons and our boys who sit and see this. They see men leading in worship. We have some men Sunday school teachers. I really think that men, you would be fulfilling a great role by you standing up before our children and saying, "Let me teach you the Bible." That would be huge. You think that's a woman's job? Try it out, you little wimps. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, it's important for our children to be seeing us leading them in worship. The priest did two things in the Bible. He went before the people on behalf of God, and he went before God on behalf of the people as a worshiper, intercessor, and leader. So I ask you, what's your biblical role as a man? Lead your family in worship. Just start right there. Just start right there. And I can tell you from personal experience, I raised 6 children. The hardest thing that I ever did as a family was to have family devotions. In fact is, quite honestly, as the kids got older, it tapered off. We were not nearly so careful about family devotions. To now, my daughter she's only home on weekends. So it should be my wife and I. Honestly, it's the most difficult thing in the world to do, but that's my responsibility. We need to pray for and to pray with our family. My family is scattered all the way around the world. There's very little I can do for them when they get in trouble. In fact, it breaks my heart sometimes, some of the things they get into. But there's one thing I can do. And there's one thing that is absolutely inexcusable for me as a father. I can pray for my children. I can pray for my grandchildren. It's inexcusable for me not to be praying for my children because, and I believe that God will hold me accountable in my role as a priest, responsible for the spiritual things in my family. Not only that, God wants the men to be the provider. Now, in our world today, there's a lot of women in the workforce. My wife is one of them. My wife is very good at what she does. I'm very proud of her. I think she works absolutely too much. I think she's much more caught up in her work than she is in much of the rest of her life. I'm trying to teach her some balance, but she's very good at what she does. However, she doesn't have any children at home either. She just has this child. So I'm one of the worst. The thing is this. As the man in the family, we're to be the provider. I'm happy for her to go and work and to do the best and to excel at what she does. And I support her and encourage her in that. But as the provider, I feel the responsibility that I should be the one to make the decision. And we talk, in fact, my wife many times has disagreed with me, but she's always followed. Coming to Taiwan was one of those. My wife has all her life wanted to live in Europe. She always envisions herself living in a village in Europe. And I said, dear, it is not going to happen in my lifetime. I'm Asian. I love Asia. I'm going to live in Asia. And, she's done very well here. The man is the husband, the father, the man is the provider. He's the visionary for the family. And those that God allows, he's the provider of affirmation. He's the provider of emotional strength. He's the provider of physical needs. And men, it's not, you don't have to wait to your father. You don't have to wait to your husband to be that provider. You can begin to be that provider, to stand up and to help those who need some help. This world needs some caring men who are not afraid to go to somebody who needs some help and say, I'm here for you. I will help. I will stand with you. I'll stand until I can't stand any longer, but I'm here for you. We need some men who aren't blown around and blown away by the different winds of this culture and the thinking of this culture, but are saying, you know what? God has given me a role to be the priest, to be spiritual, to be the provider, and I will be that man. There's also the role that I think that we have probably failed in the most as men, and that is we're to be the protector. We're to be the protector. I look at our culture today, and they laugh and they scoff and they mock men. Why? Because we have lost their trust. We have lost the trust of people in general, but women in particular. Because we as men have abused our position in taking what's not ours. We have, as men, have abused others and harmed them because we have not protected their purity. We have not protected their innocence. In fact, we have been the worst at destroying a woman's purity and destroying their innocence. The Bible has much to say about incest. It's a shame. It's a crying shame when a daughter cannot trust her own father. It's a crying shame that it's a horror. It's a deep scar that a daughter cannot feel safe and protected in her brother's presence or her father's presence. You know, men, the reason it's so serious in failing as being a protector is because we as men have destroyed the image of Father God. I got to tell you, that has got to be a frightening thought. To stand before God and to realize that in somebody's life, someone who may have been close to you, that you brought into this world, and you destroyed their relationship with God because you destroyed the trusting relationship as father to them. I'm saying to you, men, if there's one thing that we need to absolutely be careful of is we need to stand up and say, I will protect your purity. Even as teenage boys, I would say your step into manhood is when you stand up and say, I will protect the virginity and the purity of those women and girls around me. I will not allow them to lose their purity or innocence. If we want to regain that trust that should be there, then it's time that we step up and say, I will not allow you to be harmed physically, emotionally, or spiritually. You say, well, what if they don't want that? You decide right now that you will be a protector of those whom God has brought into your presence regardless of what anybody wants. Guys, what do? Teenage guys? Girl says that she's willing to give herself to you, willing to allow you to do whatever, just throws herself on you. What do? Be the man. Be the man. Just say no. I will not allow you to be violated. I will protect you even though you don't know you need to be protected. I would say, folks, in my experience, this is where we as men have failed miserably. And if I can be so bold as to tell you my own experience in my family, where one of my daughters was violated by a very trusted missionary family. We live in a broken world, a fallen world. But what if that guy had just said, I will stand and be pure and I'll be a protector? It affects me greatly as a dad. It's like, Dad, where were you? Why weren't you there to protect your daughter? Why weren't you there to keep her safe? Men, I'm saying to you this, determine you will fulfill the role of protector, provider, and priest that God wants you to be. That is not something for weaklings. I accept the weakness that I have. I accept the difficulties, but I'm on my knees and I'm saying, God, you called me to this role by giving me this gender. Now, you be the spirit within me to make me the man you want me to be. In my home and amongst my colleagues. Why should we care about a biblical view of sexuality? Because God cares. God cares. We believe that God made us. We believe He created our sexuality. It's perfect, it's beautiful, it's fulfilling, it's compelling. but it can be destroyed also. God wants us to protect it. He created this sexuality, and it's wonderful, but sin entered in. Sin corrupted it. Sex has become such an object of lust and such an object of abuse. Humankind has thoroughly twisted sex. May I say, men have thoroughly twisted sex. It's almost lost its original intent of intimacy and procreation in a marriage relationship. It's practically lost. You go to most college campuses, and sex is some kind of recreation you do on the weekend. And what do you do when you take that attitude into a marriage relationship? It destroys that marriage relationship before it's even started. But the thing is this, and folks, here's where we are today. Jesus came to redeem us. Jesus came to redeem a world to himself. And so I listen carefully. I believe with all my heart that only Christians, followers of Jesus who are redeemed, can actually enjoy what God intended of our human sexuality. Because we can see it through God's eyes. We can see it as God intended it. And that's why we need a good, solid worldview of God's intentions of our human sexuality. As with other practices in all things, sex, when it's in its right context, it's wonderful. It's intended to be enjoyed. But when it's corrupted and abused, it's very destructive. So we live in the New Testament. We're New Covenant Christians. What do we learn from the Old Covenant? We learn from the Old Covenant that God has a design. We sometimes get caught up in, should I keep these as rules? God has a design. Learn from this what God's design is. And he demands us, not so much the nitpicky little rules, but that we should follow what his design is. Maintain holiness and purity. With God, there's no exceptions in that. No exceptions in the entire part of our life. In the New Covenant morality, holiness are matters of the heart, not of the law. This is a very critical point that we need to make here. We are New Testament Christians. We're under grace. But may I say this? This morality, this desire for holiness, it's a matter of the heart. It's not a matter of, can I keep the rules so that God doesn't get mad? It's a matter of, does God have my heart? Do I have a fervent desire to follow his design, to enjoy the most of what he has for us? It's not a matter of how we enforce God's laws. In fact, our self-examination should ask, how much do I agree with God's design? That's the question. How much do I agree with God's design? In the New Covenant, the New Testament, we have the presence of God's Spirit within us. So, we should be intimately sensitive to God's Spirit. Let me say that again. We should be intimately sensitive to the Spirit of God dwelling within us. And that sensitivity should result in obedience, not yielding to the ways and the thoughts and the policies and the rules of this world. In the New Covenant, we have the Spirit of God who indwells us and empowers us to know the heart of God. That's where the issue is. Knowing the heart of God and desiring to follow his design. He is the perfect designer. So, may I say to you women here today, I can't say that I speak for all men, but I would say this. Rather than not trusting us, we need your help. We need your help. We need your help to build us up to be what God wants us to be. Yes, it may take some time to restore that trusting relationship, but if we're to live in God's presence, we need your trust that we can be the men of God he wants us to be. So men, according to Ephesians, the Bible says that we're to give ourselves to our wives as Jesus gave himself for his bride, Ephesians 5:25. How did Jesus give himself to the bride? He gave his life for his bride. It would not be hard for women to respond in trust, restoring us to the place that we should be if we're willing to give our lives for our wife. As women, The Bible says, yield yourselves to God to respect and honor the man of God. All I'm saying to you is this. I purposely read through these things, showed God's rules and regulations, because God gave them to those people. They didn't have an idea how to live. God told them how to live. But what he's saying to us today is, do you want to follow my design? There's a design there. There's a perfection there that he desires for us to live and to enjoy. It's a matter of the heart. Is that what we want to follow? In just a minute, we're going to close the service, and I'm going to take an offering at the end of the service today. But what I'd like you to do is for just a moment to pause and to think, what has God spoken to me about today? Too often we close the service, bam, and we're out of here. We don't take any time or pause for reflection. So I'm just going to pray. I'm going to leave some quiet time, and then we'll play some music, and the ushers will come and receive our offering today. Our Father, there's no question, Lord, that we're a broken people. We desperately need redemption. And we rejoice that Jesus came and he bought us. You gave your life and bought us back. We belong to you. If we would just come to you and recognize that we belong to Jesus Christ, and that we, through your word and through your teaching and through your Holy Spirit, we want to come into line with your design. And I speak for myself, God, that I could stand in your presence as a man of God. I stand there by the grace of God. I pray for each of the men that are here today, Lord, that you would put within us a desire to be godly men, to be that spiritual leader in the lives of our families, to be the example, to show to how our family how to lead and to serve God. And Lord, that we would be the honest provider. We would do what we can, supporting our families, supporting our wives. And that, Lord Jesus, you would help us to be the protector. God, so often we cringe, we shy away from stepping up to our role. We live in a society that looks down on dominant male leadership, and we don't have to be obnoxious. We just need to stand for what's pure and right, and we need to stand for the innocence of our families and their purity, and we need to protect them, Lord, from enemies that would lead them astray. We need to stand true for what's truth, what you hold for us. So I pray, God, that you would raise us up a godly generation of men to lead by example and by action. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Ushers, if you'll come, we'll receive our offering at this time. I hope that you'll forgive me for taking too long, but we'll